Hello, and welcome to The Analytical Gamer, where we try to turn a critical eye to the design and history of video games and dig a little bit deeper. And what we're going to be talking about today is the evolution of multiplayer games over time, how they've changed. And in particular, what I'd like to focus on is an increasing emergence of games with design which actually is not very fun. And that are pay to win games, games that are grindy as anything. And in many ways, I think that these games have taken us backwards instead of forwards. Although there are a few notable exceptions. So the first game that I'd like to talk about is Mario Kart 64. Now, Mario Kart 64 is a complete classic, and it's a fantastic game. But the reason I'd like to talk about Mario Kart 64 is because there's something in its simplicity, which is really a starting point for the structure of progression in multiplayer games over time. And what I think is really important about Mario Kart 64 is that no matter how long you've been playing the game, unlocks are not significant. So all players in a split screen, 4-player Mario Kart 64 game, they all start from a basis that is fundamentally fair. They all start from the same power level of their characters. And it doesn't matter how long you play Mario Kart 64, you're not unlocking any further characters, you're not unlocking any further abilities, your kart doesn't go faster. So, at least from a perspective of the power of the characters in the game, no one has any advantage, any material advantage. So the only thing that differentiates players is their ability. And I think this is a fantastic starting point to start to look at the design of multiplayer games, because it's really a sort of square one. This is the most basic type of multiplayer game, where there is no progression system, there are no unlocks, and there's something very pure and fair about that. So the only thing differentiating players is their ability to play Mario Kart better or worse. Now, obviously, this is a sort of game that is more of a party game. It's more of a fun with friends kind of game, rather than, more modern games, which have become a lot more serious and a lot more competitively inclined. But it's still an interesting starting point. So this is where we begin in 1996 with Mario Kart, with a very, very simple progression chart that I show here. Doesn't matter how long you play, it could be 1 hour, it could be 1,000 hours. The power level of your character is exactly the same. It's as high as it ever will be. What I want to do is to jump forward to 2007 with the release of Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Now, Call of Duty might not be exactly the first game with the type of progression I'm going to be talking about and the type of multiplayer structure I'm going to be talking about, but it is very much an archetypal game, an incredibly popular game that, at least for me, defined that generation of gaming. And obviously there's a lot of significant changes to get from Mario Kart 64 to Call of Duty. One of those is the move to online multiplayer, which is obviously a huge difference. But what I'd like to focus on is a change in the structure of progression. Because what changes going from Mario Kart to Call of Duty Modern Warfare is that the power level of your character is no longer fixed over time. It increases as you level up. In the case of Modern Warfare, it increases as you unlock classes and guns. And this is a very big change, because it means that you go from the simple model of Mario Kart, where just a player's ability would, over time, determine how well they do in-game, to a situation where putting more hours into the game starts to be paid back with a higher power level of your character. So a player who's not so good but has played for longer and unlocked certain items and guns could be doing much better than a player who has higher ability but is just, starting out. It's a very early stage. However, what I would note about Call of Duty Modern Warfare and those kind of games, Call of Duty Black Ops was the big title that I remember quite fondly, is that the actual amount of time required to make the unlocks is not that high. it's a reasonable amount of time. I mean, I've put here an illustrative graph of what I consider the amount of time roughly it would have been. I think after about 100 hours, you would be close to having unlocked every gun in the game, and you'd be close to being as powerful as you possibly could be. And what is very important, I think, is that back then, maybe a good 10, 15 years ago, these multiplayer online games, they had a cap on how powerful you could get. And it was a cap that could be reasonably attained by a reasonable human being playing, an hour of the game every day, or playing a few hours at the weekend for a number of weekends. Of course, you could prestige in Call of Duty, you could reset everything, but that was purely a cosmetic thing that would take you beyond 100 hours of gameplay online, roughly speaking. So people could go ahead and do that, but it wouldn't actually affect the outcome of games. So I think that from a player perspective, that generation of Call of Duties was actually a very reasonable design and possibly a step forward, because it allowed you to have the progression where you felt like you were getting stronger over time. It adds interest. It adds extra dimensions of the game. And it gives you a sense that you're going forward as a player, as well as introducing interesting decisions about what guns you choose to take into the game. But the amount of time required to unlock everything that had an effect on gameplay at least, was very reasonable. It could be achieved by a normal human being living a healthy life. There was no pay to win. Massively important change as well. And there would have been no need for pay to win even if it had been in those titles, because why would I pay to unlock all the top guns if I know that I can get there within maybe 100 hours of gameplay? So for me, Call of Duty Modern Warfare and that era of games represented a big change in the structure of multiplayer games, but it was generally, I think, one for the better, and I have very fond memories of those games. And I think that brings me quite nicely onto the title that both was massively important as the first title to really nail, in a terrible way, this pay-to-win and loot box-based gameplay mechanics. And this was both a title that sort of invented a lot of these mechanics and pioneered them very early on, and also a title that is archetypal and very popular. And that title is FIFA, specifically the FIFA Ultimate Team game mode. And that game mode actually was first released in the 2006-2007 FIFA Champions League title, although it first had a full release in FIFA 2009. And what FIFA is, FIFA Ultimate Team, is a game mode where you build a team of players. You can have players from any team in the world. You build your dream team by buying and selling players using an in-game currency of coins. But you can also get players by paying directly for packs. And packs are basically a loot box mechanic where you buy a pack, you open a pack, and it has random players. Usually, it has a load of crap players. And every maybe 1 in 100 packs, it has a really good player. And there are some players who are incredibly, incredibly rare and the strongest players in the game. And what I would like to observe and really draw out that makes FIFA Ultimate Team different compared to what has come before is that the key difference is, unlike these Call of Duty titles, is that in FIFA Ultimate Team, it doesn't matter how much you play, assuming you're not paying, you never reach the full power level. You never unlock the most powerful team. It doesn't matter. You can pay for 1,000 hours in one season. And note, these games get sold every year and your team resets even every season. So even if you do 1,000 hours in one year's title, next year everyone moves on to the next title, and your team is gone. But even if you do 1,000 hours, you will have a really good team, but you won't have the very best team. And I can show my calculations based on my own play of FIFA 21 to show that this is the case. And the reason it's the case is because they have some very, very, very rare players who are the most powerful. And ultimately, I think that it's this design, it's specifically having the fact that your power level in the game can just keep going up. There's no cap on it. It's unlimited, and it takes hours and hours and hours and hours. It takes an amount of time that is impossible for anyone with a balanced lifestyle who isn't playing FIFA full time to do. Just to clarify a few things there. Firstly, when I say it's unlimited, the sort of improvement in power of your team over time, of course there are like a set of the very best players, and if you had all of those best players, then you would have the most powerful team, and you've reached a cap. But what makes it effectively unlimited, at least for players who aren't spending masses of money on the game, is the fact that the actual amount of time it would take to earn this best team in the game, it's impossible, essentially. Or you would have to play every single hour of every day to get there. And I'll just include my calculations now that show this. And what I've done is I've looked at a team that is used by one of the top professional players. It's a very good team. It has some expensive players, but it's actually not the very, very best team. The very best teams might end up having multiple 15 million coin players. So it would cost 3 or 4 times more than this team. And what I've also included is the number of coins I earn approximately per hour just from free to playing this game. It's about 20,000 coins per hour. And so my calculation is that, this guy's top team costs over 15 million coins. It would take me almost 800 hours of gameplay to earn that many coins. And given the amount of weeks in the season so far, that would take me 27 hours per week. So basically, if you want to have a competitive FIFA Ultimate Team free to play, you're looking at taking on nearly a full-time job of playing. Given, a full-time job in my country is about 40 hours a week. Of course, that's absolutely not what EA would like you to do in FIFA Ultimate Team. They would like you to buy packs, to spend money to get better at the game. So if you spend a large amount of money, you might end up being able to afford one of these teams without spending a huge amount of time. Of course, it's interesting to ask how much real-world money it would cost to buy one of these teams. And the answer is an absolutely obscene sum. From what I can tell online, the cost of buying FIFA coins on the black market, which is against FIFA's terms of service, is about 1,000 USD for 10 million coins. So this 15 million team I'm talking about would cost 1.5 grand in black market FIFA coins. And if you use EA's approved and allowed method of paying them for packs, that would on average probably cost something like 2 to 3 to 4 times more. So potentially 3,000 to 6,000 USD. Although of course it's all up to your random luck as well, because those packs don't have a set amount of value, they have random contents. Just a final thing to note here is that, a lot of the criticism of EA and this business model has been focused on the loot box element and the fact that you are allowing children to indirectly gamble, not for money, but on what they will receive in these card packs. But actually, firstly, I think that these loot boxes are terrible and they are bad for children. But interestingly, I'm actually diagnosing that the main problem here is that the game has an unlimited cap in terms of how good your player abilities can go, and then that they allow you to pay for that for those abilities by buying packs. This model could be implemented with or without random chance. EA could just allow you to buy a set amount of coins and not have loot boxes. So it'd be great if they removed the loot boxes. That would be a step forward, I think. It's potentially going to happen because of regulation in a number of countries. But it wouldn't fully solve the problem, because if they still allow you to buy FIFA coins, there would still, you would still have this problem of either having to spend masses of money to get a top team, or having to put in a huge number of hours. So, what's the root of the problem with FIFA Ultimate Team? Why do I think that it is, as I said, hell in terms of game design? Well, I diagnose two main problems here. The first problem is the pay-to-win element. It's that feeling that when you go up against another person with a powerful team, you never know whether they got that team by working to unlock it or just by paying money to have a more powerful team. And that fundamentally feels unfair because, we have this idea of fairness, that in competition, people should be competing on a level playing field. And there are certain norms around what kind of advantage money is able to buy you in competition. And basically, what pay to win does is it makes you feel that other players are getting an unfair advantage and you feel pressured to spend money yourself to compete. And that ends up being bad for individual gamers. That's the first problem. But I think the problem actually runs deeper than that. Because even if you took out all of the pay-to-win elements, even if you removed the feature to buy better players from the game, I still think there would be a problem. And the second problem is that of grinding and grindiness. It's actually inherently linked to pay-to-win, in my view. But the problem with grindiness is when games introduce progression systems that encourage playing massive amount of hours to get a good enough level. And that's one of the huge problems with FIFA Ultimate Team. As I said, you can play this game for thousands of hours and still be progressing, still be feeling that you're not yet there yet. And I think that ends up making the game much less satisfactory. And it just feels incredibly repetitive. And there are certain individual design elements within the game that explicitly encourage grindiness by allowing players to unlock rewards by playing game modes that are seen as less fun. So why would you include grindiness in your game? It's obvious why you'd include pay to win. It's to make more profit. Well, I think the grindiness is inherently linked to the pay to win. For that, and the reason for that is that the grindy elements of the game are there to feel bad, to feel worse than the fun elements of the game, to pressure you to buy more pay-to-win unlocks, to pressure you to spend the money to buy packs to not have to grind. And so pay-to-win has opened a real Pandora's box because it actually incentivizes game companies to design parts of their game to be less fun, to make you want to pay more. It's really sad. So that is why I think that we really are going backwards with some of these game designs, just for the benefit of making more money. And I'm planning to make a video on exactly how and why these pay-to-win elements work, why they're so profitable, and how they allow games companies to make more profit. And I'll probably release that next week. Now, there is a ray of hope in all this, in that certain games companies, particular Valve, are willing to design games that completely go back to 1996. They have progression systems that are 100% flat, at least in terms of the actual power of your player as it affects game outcomes. And I think it's fantastic. So the archetypal example of this is Counter-Strike Go, CSGO, released in 2012. And it doesn't matter what level you are over time in the game, all you unlock are cosmetics. So from day one going into the game, you have all the guns unlocked. Everyone is on a level playing field. Interestingly, in spite of CSGO having no pay to win in terms of the actual power level of your characters, the game does include loot boxes, which sort of proves my point from earlier about how the core problem with FIFA is not the presence of loot boxes, but it's the presence of unlimited progression and grinding. But what's really important is that in CSGO, the loot boxes and the payments are for purely cosmetic items, like this beautiful knife that's pictured in the screenshot. So although they look very pretty, they look cool, they're a status item in the game, they're a flex, they do not affect gameplay whatsoever. And obviously we don't know the exact financials of Valve because it's a private company, but it strikes me that they've been fairly successful, quite successful with this monetization model. I would think that if Valve did add more grinding and added the ability to buy more powerful weapons, that they would make more money. Just because the pressure then and the pull on gamers to spend is higher, because presumably there's some proportion of people who just don't care about the cosmetics. So there probably is still an incentive there. So perhaps Valve has just chosen to take a more ethical model that lets them sleep at night, rather than really damaging the game mechanics and gamer experience to really make as much money as possible. So, to summarize everything, firstly, I think that there is a clear evolution in multiplayer games from a simple model with every player having a flat power level to a more complicated model with progression, albeit capped progression, as is encapsulated by Call of Duty Modern Warfare, to the most modern type of game where there is unlimited progression, or effectively unlimited progression, because it takes you so many hours to reach a high level of power that no free-to-play player is ever realistically going to get there. Or if they did, it would be very harmful to them. And then finally, and interestingly, things appear to have come full circle, because we have games like CSGO and Dota 2, which actually take things back to the Mario Kart 64 days with a flat ability structure. Now, I think, and I think a lot of people would agree, that there are two types of game here that are great, fantastic for gamers, and one type that's very, very bad for gamers. So the Mario 64 and CSGO model has a really beautiful simplicity, which you have to appreciate. That means that games are determined purely on the basis of players' abilities, and I think that is a very nice model. Then we have the Call of Duty Modern Warfare model, which has game progression, but it's game progression which is capped after a reasonable amount of hours put in. And I think that this too is a great model for gamers, because you feel a sense of progression, you feel changes in the game, which is interesting, it's satisfying, but it doesn't require you to put in so many hours that it feels like a grind. Then we have the FIFA Ultimate Team unlimited progression model, where you keep getting better for hours and hours on end, to the point where even if you put 1,000 hours in 1 year to one of these games, you won't have a fully maxed out team or ability level. And I think that this is a terrible model that creates a grind for players, which ends up incentivizing the pay-to-win elements of the game. Looking to the future then, I would love if we saw more games like the older Call of Duty games, and especially the Mario Kart 64 model, the CSGO model. But unfortunately, I very much suspect that we'll be seeing more and more games go the way of FIFA Ultimate Team. And the reason for that is because it makes the companies more money, and that's something that I would like to go into in more detail on another video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. In terms of future videos, I'm thinking of releasing one about the incentives of pay to win, and microtransactions and the economics of that. So let me know if you'd like that. Or alternatively, I'm thinking of talking about the development of the games I've enjoyed in my lifetime, sort of from the Nintendo 64 era, possibly up to the PS2 era, PS3 era, probably not much further. So thank you and all the best, and I hope your game outcomes are determined by your ability, unless of course you get blue shelled in Mario Kart. Thanks.